Hello, this is Coding Gicha for full-stack developers. Beekeeper Studio is very popular as an SQL query client and database manager due to its modern and simple UI and fast processing. However, personally, I find it somewhat lacking that SQL keywords are automatically auto-completed to lowercase, there is no shortcut for case conversion, and whitespace is not displayed as a symbol. If you use Visual Studio Code as your IDE tool, the database client extension can resolve these shortcomings of Beekeeper Studio. This is because Visual Studio Code already includes features such as case conversion shortcuts and the ability to display whitespace as a symbol. If you find the process of installing and running a separate application cumbersome, this will be even more appealing. I will search for database client. I will install database client. After installing database client, service and database menus will be added to the left activity bar. Since there is no saved connection information yet, the Create Connection button is displayed. The Create Connection button is the same as the Add Connection button at the top. When there is a list of connection information, you can add more connections via the Add Connection button at the top. It supports not only various DBMSs but also clients that connect to services such as SSH and Docker. Connection configuration settings are the same whether added from the database or service menus. DBMS connection information is automatically categorized and managed in the database menu, while server connection information such as SSH is automatically categorized and managed in the service menu. In Beekeeper Studio, Oracle, MongoDB, and others are only available in the paid full version, but they can be used for free in the database client. I will now enter the MariaDB connection information. I will save the connection information. I will now connect to MariaDB. Tables, views, and other elements are managed hierarchically under the schemas. You can use the features provided by the database client through the context menu. However, personally, considering the need for tool independence in server environments where GUI tools cannot be used, it may be better to learn by working primarily with SQL queries. Double-clicking a table displays the saved data. Now, I will write and execute SQL directly. Although SQL keywords are not case-sensitive, I prefer uppercase for readability, and the database client completes SQL keywords in uppercase to match my preference. You can also use the same shortcut set in Visual Studio Code for case conversion. I habitually entered SQL keywords in uppercase, but it automatically completes them to uppercase even if entered in lowercase. Clicking the Execute button in the upper right corner executes the SQL query. SQL queries executed from the database menu are managed under Queries. You can write and execute SQL queries directly in the database menu, but you can also open an SQL file in the Explorer menu and execute it immediately. Instead of a query that simply retrieves the entire table data, I will execute an SQL query that retrieves the data in a hierarchical structure based on BOM-IDs. I will retrieve the BOM hierarchy of skateboard. Moving the mouse to the top right to execute is a bit cumbersome, but you can also execute it using the Control-Enter shortcut. One drawback of the database client is that tab characters are not displayed in the query results. I will modify the tab character to 4 spaces in query again. Now, the indentation is displayed according to the hierarchical structure. I will also query the BOM hierarchy for the ladder back chair. Personally, I place importance on the distinction between tabs and spaces. The whitespace display settings in Visual Studio Code are applied directly to SQL query statements. You can change the connection and schema directly at the top of the SQL file to execute it. Since the status bar can become cluttered with unnecessarily excessive information, I will remove the database client extension information from the status bar. Personally, I prefer working with services like SSH directly in the terminal, so I will remove the service from the left activity bar. While Beekeeper Studio is excellent, I personally found it somewhat lacking that SQL keywords autocomplete to lowercase. There is no shortcut for case conversion, and whitespace is not displayed as a symbol. However, Database Client resolves these issues. Thank you for watching.